We are live. We are live. Welcome, welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Dr. Nova Bryant. I have my special guest here, Watkins Rogers. This is the When Pets Fly Veterinary Air Travel Podcast. Thanks for joining us. We were previously known as Facebook Lives, but nope, we are now the Veterinary Air Travel Podcast. And again, thank you for joining. I'm Dr. Nova Bryant. To introduce myself, I am a veterinarian and I work in the airline industry. I've been on staff with Delta Airlines since 2018 and enjoy the role. And it's allowed me to see kind of the insight of animal transportation. So based upon that, I have developed my own platform, When Pets Fly, to share pet-centric or veterinary-led education to help better prepare pets for air travel. And I started that in 2020, and gosh, can't believe it's going to be 6 years soon. Within that, I have a website, www.winpets.com. I'm on social media with Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I have these podcasts. Again, we changed the name to Veterinary Air Travel Podcast. Now, we've been doing these for quite a few years now and had a lot of guests. And I always call them different stakeholders of the animal transportation industry. And we have a return guest today, Watkins Rogers, who's a great friend of ours. She shares a lot of information on zoo animal transportation, and I love it. So no different today. She's here, and we're going to get to a great conversation. But before I start, Rochelle, go ahead and introduce yourself so everybody gets to know you. Sure. Those who don't know you can get to know you a little bit better.
Okay. Well, I'm not a vet, but I've worked with a lot of vets.
That's good. You could have said you slept in a hotel. What is it, a Hotel Express or something like that?
Yeah. Well, and I've worked in research industry with veterinarians as well as zoological veterinarians.
Yes.
I've got a 53-year-long career in zoos. I retired in 2021. I worked with animals for the majority of that. The last 20 years, I was the zoological registrar and records coordinator for Zoo Miami in Miami, Florida. And I have worked with like primates, elephants, hoofstock, carnivores, mostly mammals, not too much with birds and reptiles, just a little bit. Mm-hmm. No amphibians. But I've worked with a lot of people that have. So I often do consulting, and that's been my main thing. I do pro bono consulting now for records management, permit applications, and shipping logistics for people in the animal industry. I work with AZA, Association of Zoos and Aquariums, American Zoo Association, ZAA. I'm also a member of the Zoological Registrars Association and served on the board of that organization. And I was a professional zookeeper for 30 years and a supervisor towards the end of that time. So I've got a lot of experience and so a lot, and I like to learn. So I'm continually learning new things and try to stay up to date with the regs.
Well, I met you a couple years back because I remember I was asking about zoo animal transportation. I think I contacted AZA, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and I was looking for more education on zoo animal transportation, and met you, and then got invited to speak basically through a few conferences that you developed, and I thought they were outstanding. I'll be honest, I did not participate on anything else, but I know that we had the best session ever. I know we did because they were so well organized and put together from you. It was just outstanding. And remember, we had a panel of a bunch of us. I think there was probably at least 8 or 9 of us on the panel, and you just organized things so well. And I honestly, again, if anything that you organize, folks need to be looking out for it because it's going to be well organized and put together. And you should be a part of all these zoo animal associations, a part of the conferences and helping develop things because very, very thoughtful, very well organized, and very well done. So thank you for that.
And actually, the first time I worked with you was when Steve Olson had not retired yet, and it was during COVID, and I was the course administrator for the AZA animal transport course.
Yep.
And I needed a lot of people because we weren't going to be in person, and to develop some of these discussions, we needed subject matter experts. And so Steve Olson said, oh, you got to take Dr. Bryant and she's the only veterinarian that works for an airline. And I'm like, really? Why not? Do other veterinarians work
I know.
So we need to get that going.
I know. But yeah, we need to definitely get it growing. Definitely growing. Hey, before we get started, I wanted to talk about something that I got an email this morning that kind of got my attention. I don't know if you've seen it, but it was an email in reference to the change of the importation requirements for horses and I guess equine species coming into the United States, which kind of surprised me. I do have to do some more research on it, but it's kind of concerning because just worry about them, the whole process with them and they're being fit to fly, medically fit to fly, and all that other stuff coming to the United States. And again, I know it's complicated. Actually, I don't know if I share it with you guys. I'll share with you guys. We are actually in October 30th, we will have a gentleman coming on board on our podcast to discuss the transportation of horses. So I'm really looking forward to that and be able to discuss this a little bit further. But tell me your thoughts on this new change with the horse.
Yeah, for zoos, zoos have been, the veterinarians and zoos have been moving towards more of a different type of quarantine for each animal, depending on where they came from, their medical history, the institution's medical history, and trying to shorten quarantines for animals that don't need the 30-day quarantine. And that actually helps the animal adapt quicker when they arrive at a zoo. If they've been deemed healthy enough to be put in a herd, that could happen. Or there may be like a visual but not full contact introduction. And in some states, the regulations treat exotic equids the same as a domestic horse, which in the zoo business, we don't consider, zebras to be like a horse. We consider them to be more wild, unless they've been preconditioned before you get them, they're going to be like a regular wild animal. And, this could make a lot of veterinarians kind of worry about doing imports from other countries, because once that animal comes in, if they're exempt from something that they didn't used to be exempt from the last time you imported one, you're going to need to look at that animal differently than the previous animal you imported.
Right. No, yeah, I think it's going to put more pressure in the U.S. as far as the requirements, as far as inspecting and ensuring they meet the requirements, and probably the quarantine period is going to be really significant to really pay attention to these animals, because horses, I mean, it's one thing to transport dogs and cats. Dogs, we worry more about rabies, and really, I think that's the top. It's sad, but that's the most public health significant or zoonotic disease that folks are worried about for dogs. But for horses, there are plenty other diseases that are considered foreign animal diseases that you have to be concerned about. And if it hits into the equine industry, it's going to be devastating. Yeah.
It will impact the agricultural industry in the United States if animals slip through the cracks because they were exempt from something in another country.
Yep. So more to come. We don't know. It will pan out and decide, but it's a scary thing to take away some requirements.
Yeah, it would be nice if, and like you, I haven't delved into it deeply yet, but it would be nice if there's something in there saying, okay, they're exempt from this last check, but the licensed veterinarian that does the health certificate needs to be expert in that species. If the veterinarian is expert in that species and not just a generic veterinarian, then that veterinarian will have a better health certificate for them to look at than one that just does the basic whatever he thinks is required testing.
That's the thing that's a little bit different in the U.S. We have categories as far as accreditation for veterinarians. There's category 1 and category 2. If you're going to deal with large animals and agricultural animals, you're going to be a category 2 veterinarian, and you're more specific in knowing those species, horses and what have you and everything. So it's almost saying, I mean, but I don't know how it is in other countries. If they're a veterinary authority in that country, do they sign for all species? Is there a criteria show that they're specific? They know that particular species of animals better than others? I don't know, but yeah, that's the worry.
I know that when I've dealt with assisting the vets with administrative work that needs to be done for an import or an export, sometimes I've been in touch with the regional veterinarians that work in different countries on behalf of USDA. And they will send me a list of what I need to be concerned about, what I need to ask. And some countries even have like a questionnaire. Like I remember we had like a 13-page questionnaire for Colombia. They wanted like an image of the map of the zoo. They wanted to know what species we had. They want to know what diseases we had, what kind of preventative medicine program we have. I mean, it was almost as if they were auditioning for somebody to be hired from the zoo. You know, I mean, it was very detailed, but it was like all in Spanish. So we had to get it translated so that we didn't misinterpret any of the questions. And then we ended up getting it filled out to their satisfaction. But it was, you know, pretty in like detailed. You know, I wasn't used to that from other countries.
That's good though. Good, but yeah, we will see though what's going to happen. And like I said, for those tune in October 30th, we will have a gentleman speaking on the transportation of horses. Please tune in with us, and hopefully we'll get some of these. By that time, we'll have some answers to, and be able to really dissect it all, and hopefully I'll answer some questions for us then. But please join us then. So we have, let's see, what do you want to discuss today? There's so many different things. As far as the transportation of zoo animals,
the contingency plan rule is very applicable to animal transport, and this has been an ongoing discussion between USDA and zoological institutions. There's always USDA there at a conference for the government affairs, but a lot of institutions are, you know, we have some institutions that are very large and they produce documents that are really beefy, you know, and then we have other institutions that are smaller, maybe don't have as complicated of a collection, and their documents might not be as detailed, but that doesn't mean that they're not done well. So, what, you know, what is it this? Is it this? Is it this? You know,
I'm gonna back you up a little bit too with that, because that USDA contingency plan or ruling that was needed, regulation, even as transporters, intermediate transporters, and transporters, and carriers. I'm sorry, intermediate transporters and carriers. So the carriers include the airlines. We also have to have a USDA contingency plan in place. I believe this has been since 2020. That we have to have this in place as well to show what we're going to do in an event of a emergency. And primarily they were concerned about weather emergencies. What do we have in place to make sure the animals are safe during transport? As far as Delta, we extend a little bit further on ours, but still we know what we have our plan on. If weather, the good thing about most weather is that we know it's coming in advance, so we can plan for everything. So, but it required, like I said, the intermediate transporters and the carriers to also have this contingency plan, again, to figure out what to do in an event of an emergency with the animal. Now, with you guys, a little bit different, though, because do you guys use your contingency plan for, I mean, I'm sure you have something that's there in sight for emergencies there, but a contingency plan during transport, too. Is there something available for that?
So all zoos do that to a certain level, and it really depends on, are you just driving the animal to the airport, or are you driving it across state lines to meet with another zoo, and then they're taking animals and you're taking animals and then you're going back, or are you driving, dropping off, and they're taking it? You know, all of these different things are individual transports. So like if you do an air transport, there are 3 transports: to the airport, in the plane, and to the new facility.
Right.
So each of those transports has to have a contingency plan. What happens if you have a flat tire, you get in an accident, you know, some incident happens which causes you to change the route you were going to take, extends the amount of time the animal's going to be in the crate, and maybe that's not good for the animal that you're transporting. It may be an elderly animal or a younger animal, or you may not have had enough time to train it to be in the crate, because sometimes these transport activities may be less advanced planning than if it's like a breeding program, your genetics, and you say next year we want to breed these animals and they need to move them to these facilities. But say that you have an incident at your zoo, you need to move animals out quickly, and there's maybe Newcastle's disease is hitting the state of California, and you're trying to do it advance of the state closing. So you may need to expedite what you already were planning so that you can get the animal out and that it doesn't stay where it was, because maybe it's going to only have 2 more clutches of eggs because of its age, and it's a real important genetically valuable animal that needs to be represented. So there's all these different things that come into play with zoo transport.
I would imagine, you think of, and I'm not very familiar with California as far as locations. I'm really not familiar with the state, but I'd imagine, think about when the wildfires, they periodically have these wildfires. I don't know if any zoos have been impacted by it. Maybe but that's devastating. I don't know. How do you respond to something like that?
So there's an excellent group called ZDR3, and I'm going to get it wrong probably because I always forget the 3 R's. Response, Rescue, and Recovery. And they're a nonprofit that works with exotic animal facilities. And they will come to your facility with a crew of people that are animal people from zoos that volunteer their time and equipment. And they will come and help you clean up after a hurricane, rescue animals if there's a flood. The best plan is to move animals out ahead of it. But sometimes, if it's an elephant, you got to be sure that it needs to be moved, because that's a big animal to move and very complicated, and you need specific types of personnel to be the transporter and to help you with that transport. So, all of these things, when they come into play, like zoos deal with it all the time, but somebody on the outside may not. They make a comment, they may not understand what's going on behind the scenes.
Probably have no idea what's going on behind the scenes.
Probably not. They just go, oh, we got a panda, or, oh, the tiger is now in Dallas, Texas. They don't know how the tiger got there, who did it, how they did it. And some species of animals require fasting. Others have to be fed in transit. And so if you're rushing to do something because of an emergency, you have to be sure you've got all your ducks in a row, and hopefully you've had to ship one of those species before.
Yes.
And have staff that's done it. And that happens a lot, where the staff,
and having the proper shipping container that you need also for them too.
Right.
Because you can't just grab anything. I'm just going to add in one thing here. I remember getting a question from someone I think it was a young budding zoo registrar, was asking me that they felt that they had all the shipping container requirements for a particular species. They said they have an approved crate, a crate that they purchased that's approved, airline approved, that it would be already purchased for the animals. Like, no. If it says it's airline approved, it doesn't necessarily mean it's airline approved. Number one, it doesn't necessarily mean it's airline approved for a dog or cat, according to airline policies. But airline approved does definitely for zoo animals. Okay, so you can't put a wolf inside a pet rigid classified for pets, because there's specific requirements for the animal species, and IATA, the International Air Transport Association, will define it for you. So I'm sorry, I had to chime in that because I just really think it's animals in the proper shipping container.
And for zoo animals, there's everything from flat, narrow ones for crocodilians, to tall, skinny ones for hoofstock. If they've got horns, you got to account for that.
Yes.
And like with some species, you're allowed to use an air kennel. So we were shipping a harpy eagle from Florida to Panama. So what I would do for imports and exports, I would take pictures and I would ask the staff, please prepare this that when they see the crate, they see what we just came back. Oh,
I
okay,
see you now.
we're coming back.
Yeah. I don't know. Sorry.
Okay. So when they looked at the picture, the comment from the inspector's office was, we want to see padding on the top of the crate in case the harpy jumps up. We don't want it to hit its head on the crate, and we want you to put a padding up there. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then the privacy screens, like the airline looks at the crate, they look at the IATA live animal regulations and check off their list. Okay, everything meets, but it's not just the airlines that has to approve it. The port of export or port of entry has to approve it too. So that could actually, delay your shipment, which could be a problem if you've got permits that maybe you've come to the end of the time. They're only 6 months. And if you're coming to the end of the time and it's going to be a delay, you have to reapply so that you have a valid permit, because if you don't ship a valid permit, it's going to get confiscated on the other end.
Right. I'm sure you know a lot of examples where just
timing is everything. Yeah. I mean, valid permit can be something as simple as you got a valid permit, but the authority failed to sign it. It's not a valid permit.
Right.
So if you don't notice that and we got our permit, okay, we're good to go. When's the next temperature window opening up? And you're focused on that and you didn't read the permit line by line, you might miss that and then have a problem.
Yeah. And it's more devastating with zoo animals. I mean, again, think about how large they are. You got to get them acclimated to being confined in their crate, and the appropriate crate too, and just getting the whole process together to get them to the airport. So that's a lot to deal with. And the last thing one is to be denied entry.
Species where there aren't that many of them in captivity, each animal is, not like every animal doesn't count, but if you only have 5 left of a species and that animal's been approved to be in a breeding program, you want them all to survive and to all breed, for the benefit of the species.
Right. That's rough. Definitely rough. So you said the zoos need a contingency plan. I told you the airlines definitely need to have a plan in place. Another ones that I don't think they have in places, but I think they probably do. But again, they might not be under USDA's regulations. But I think about the transporters that are doing dogs and cats from animal shelters between shelters, different states, because of, say if there's a lack of animals in a certain area, they need more adoptable animals in this certain state, and they'll transport them between shelters. I think, to be honest with you, I don't know if they're USDA regulated, and my assumption is that they're not, but I think there needs to be regulations on that, because there has been some situations that's happened with those. Are you aware of them?
They do have to be registered, okay. And especially if they're receiving any money and they're doing commercial activity, they do have to have the authorization to transport that species by USDA. And, they may be able to, not that I'm advocating this, they may be able to get by with it if it's just within a state from one place to the other. And maybe you've got some of the people that work with the animals in the transport, and depending on what species it is and the state regulations, because I'm not a registered transporter, but I did check out with the states. I was going north on a trip, and this rehabber had a prairie dog that they needed to be transported, and they wanted an animal person to do it. And so I called my inspector and I said, hey, am I allowed to do this? I'm not registered. I'm not taking any money. They might reimburse me for gas, but they might not. Is this going to be illegal for me to do? And he looked at the species, he looked at what I was doing, and he listened to what I said. And he said, no, you can legally take that animal because you're not going across state lines. It's going to another rehab facility. It was just rehabbed well enough that it could go someplace else. And so I did do one of those. But
yeah,
I've, taken a lot of animals to the airport, and, I've ridden along on a lot of transports.
Yeah. I know there were some things in the past. I remember there was a situation where I believe it hit the news. This has been maybe a year or two, probably even more than 2 years ago, where there was some dogs being transported, or dogs and cats being transported across state line. I think it was from Georgia to South Carolina with one, but an AC unit failed, and they didn't recognize it, and you get to their destination, and boom, lo and behold, you got a bunch of dead dogs and cats.
Yes. The one that I remember was more recent, and it was from Chicago O'Hare Airport. They were dogs that were, I think they were coming from a dog shelter or something, but they were going to a training program to become police dogs. Ooh. And I remember it actually happened when I was given a talk at the USDA Transport Symposium.
Okay.
And I said, oh my God, this is happening now. And when I saw the back of the truck and the crates in the truck, I immediately knew they were not loaded by somebody that knew how to load. They weren't attached. They weren't tied to the walls. Some of them fell in. The man that was driving indicated that there was a traffic jam, and he was, I don't know if it was like 2 hours delayed. It was hot weather. And he said he heard them to start barking, unusual barking. So he pulled over, and see, a transporter should be stopping and checking the animals, and especially if it's the heat that you're transporting in. If you don't have a way to know that your air conditioning unit is working where the animals are, you need to maybe check more frequently, if you're not sure how it's working. And when he got back there were animals. He pulled over to the side of the road, and he had to take animals out. There were dead animals, dying animals, and heat-distressed animals. And that was very, for me, that was very sad that even happened, because, it doesn't matter to me if it's a dog or a chimpanzee or a bird. The animal is important. If you're transporting that animal, you need to be responsible for that animal. And I want to say, I could be wrong, but I want to say that the person was not a registered transporter. Right. And, it just should have never happened.
Well, it's again, it goes back to the need for a contingency plan for no matter what transporting animals. You need to know what you're going to do. And even the contingency plan saying that I'm going to check on them every hour. I'm going to do something here. I'm going to make sure water, all these things. I'm going to make sure they're tied down. I'm going to make sure there's proper ventilation, because you can stack them up, but if they're not in a position where air can flow
exactly all around, there's got to be a space. Yeah. And he was using a box truck. A refrigerated box truck, which is a good idea in the heat. However, if you have a failure of your air conditioning unit, there's no ventilation because it's a box truck. If it was a trailer that when it drives, when you're going down the road, there's flaps that pick up and air goes in and it recirculates the air. It's made for transport on the road. So, that box truck, I don't know. It seems like there should have been a camera in the back. If he can't see them, there should have been a camera or a thermometer that he could see the temperature from the cab of the place where the animals were. Because that way he would have detected the temperature change before any of the animals got heat stressed.
Yeah, no, like I said, look, we can sit here and help design what's needed on the next transport vehicle for animals because, yeah, there's things that need to be in place to ensure the safety of it. And again, all part of your planning when you're transporting animals. I was sharing a little bit with Greta before we started, before our session today, and I was saying how we were going to discuss contingency plans with zoos. And I was saying, the bad thing about, or the sad thing to me, is that when people transport their pets, they don't have a contingency plan. They don't have any other plan in place on what's going to happen if this doesn't go forward. And that's why people have these meltdowns in the airport and freak out and scream, and because they didn't get the way they thought it would go. Number one, you didn't plan properly. You didn't have, so no contingency plan. And there you go. You have to plan. Number one, prepare your pets properly for travel, all animals for travel, and then have a plan. If this doesn't work, because that's life, things don't always work out the way we want. Look, when I drive down a road in a traffic jam or roadblock, or I can't go, or say I missed something, I have to have a plan.
So I was driving down Interstate 75 north to come back to Sarasota from Homestead for a visit that I was on, and it happened to be the day that plane crashed and they closed down I-75. So I just get home, I turn on the news, and I start hearing about this plane crash. And I looked at where it happened, and I had just been there an hour before. And if I had been behind it, and then my mind always goes to, what if I was shipping an animal? Mm-hmm. If I was shipping an animal, it would have delayed the transport. The animal would have had to have been used to being in that crate longer than normal because we were going to have a delay. I would have to reroute. Depending on where I was, there may or may not have been an exit for miles. Mm-hmm. Because it was right after Alligator Alley, which Alligator Alley is a 50-mile stretch with no exits.
Oh, wow.
And they even have a sign. Are you gassed up? Because there's no gas station for the next. I think it's longer than that because there is a Miccosukee, I think it is, or a Native American Indian center where they have a gas station and they have food and stuff like that. And it's a halfway mark.
Okay.
So if you're not gassed up, and what if, you didn't gas up enough and now you're running out of gas and now you got to reroute. Mm-hmm. So it's and some trailer transports, they have what they call a chase vehicle. And that's somebody that travels behind the vehicle so that they can see what the driver doesn't see. You could have a situation where a door, you're going down the road, things are jiggling, something comes loose, a door opens. Oh, the door opened, hopefully the animals are in a crate and they're not just loaded in there, so there's all things that can happen, and so things that happen that you can't see, you need assistance.
They have stuff like that for the wide loads. Whenever you see these wide loads, right, they always have a vehicle that's behind them that's watching things. So again, as far as transporting animals, maybe that's something that needs to be added to the list of someone to be there and watch and make sure there's nothing like that happens.
Depending on the staff at the institution, if you have a relatively green staff, they may not be experienced enough. You may need to hire somebody that does have that type of experience. And what I would do if I was in that situation and I had to hire somebody, I would make sure that my key individuals were shadowing that person, because that's invaluable experience that they would be getting to shadow or accompany a transport.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Man. No, there's a lot as far as the contingency planning. It's very, very important. And again, I think as far as pet owners, start having a plan too. What's your backup plan just in case things don't work out the way you anticipate?
Yeah, the crate for pets is the most important part. And you could actually save their life by them being comfortable in that crate for an extended amount of time.
Yeah.
Because when an animal gets stressed, everything, their heart rate goes up, their body temperature goes up, and their core temperature can actually exceed the amount that's healthy for them, and they could get white muscle disease or hyperthermia, and their body can go into heat stress, and they could, die.
And again, people always wonder why the breed, when everyone loves French bulldogs. I have one sitting here right next to me too. But everyone loves this breed, the brachycephalic breed, snub nose, but they do not do well when they get stressed, overheated, and boom, they get heat stroke and they can die and quick. So be careful with transporting them, and they need to be, in a sense, acclimated to being confined. And then also just, again, make sure to fit the fly is my main thing too. Make sure to fit the fly, You know what I want to discuss with you, because a situation happened recently with a zoo, and I want to just reiterate some things too with the zoo community. Please make sure, just realize a lot of the airlines, and I know Delta specifically, we have a temperature limit policy on transporting zoo animal species, as well as pets when we transport pets. But the temperature, if it's over 80 degrees Fahrenheit, we have a restriction there, and we are a little bit more stringent than USDA's regulations. Usually it's 85. We go to 80 just to be safe, because, and this is forecasted temperature, but we just feel for the safety and welfare of the animals following that. So if you have a zoo animal shipment that's going through by Delta, by cargo, please make sure you comply with that. And you can check that even before you get to the airport. We have resources out where you can check the source that we use. And if it's over, just be aware that if you get to the airport and think that, oh, well, they're going to accept the animal, they're not going to accept the animal. So be mindful of that, the policies.
I've seen airlines not accept for carry an animal that had improper labeling. On the crate was okay, but the labeling wasn't okay. It wasn't to the IATA standards. It's not just the crate. It's not just the species. It's also like, say they are delayed. Are they going to go past that window when they have to eat or get water? Is it clear on the label what they have to do? Do you have a support team that is like maybe another zoo in that area that could help you, if you have to remove the animal, from the crate or something, if you think there's something wrong with the animal, because even, and typically a zoo will not anesthetize an animal for transport, because that's can be a dangerous situation, because if it's a species like a chimpanzee or something, the vet can't get to the animal if it's coming out of sedation, and typically they won't sedate them fully, but they might, if it's a very, anxious animal, they might need to calm them down a little bit. Well, the same thing can happen to an animal that happens to a person. You hear all the time, so-and-so was found unresponsive. Their medications maybe didn't mix well, or got a different dose than they normally do. And there could be things, maybe the age of the animal, so even if there are veterinarians with the shipment, there's things that need to be taken into account that aren't the same as they would be with your dog or cat pet at home.
Well, I definitely don't recommend any sedation for dogs and cats as well, because again, a lot of times you just don't know the impact it's going to have on them. They're better, and it just also learning too, sedatives and those things impact thermal regulation, so they can't regulate their body temperature, so they can actually sit there and overheat because of all the medication. So it's really
that's what happens with giant otters. In the animal care manual for them and in the IATA requirements, it says you can't ship them over 70 degrees because their internal body temperature will go so high when they get stressed that it can actually kill them. So, that is something that, 70 degrees in Miami is very hard to find.
That's really cool. Look, when does that happen?
Window.
That's maybe in March, maybe.
Well, maybe. this year we had a hefty winter, and even up here in Sarasota, but it has to be 70 degrees where they leave and where they land.
That's hard.
So, and a lot of people don't think about that. They're like, oh, well, it says this here. I'm like, well, okay, what does it say over there? But yeah, so it's and zoo animals tend to be like not just an animal. They have a whole program behind them. There's a whole group of people that are part of their care, from the veterinarians to the animal behaviorists to the zookeepers to the curators that manage the species in the collection. There's a whole team of people behind each animal, and there may be different reason to ship them than breeding. Maybe it's a geriatric animal, and for humane reasons, you don't want it to live alone and it can't get along in the group anymore. So I've seen where two zoos will have older animals that are going to be isolated, and they'll say, hey, let's agree to ship one of these animals and we'll put them together so they have a companion. And that's for humane care. Some animals are removed from exhibiting for humane reasons and put in a retirement area. So it's the same kind of thing like what happens with your mom or dad. They get to a certain age, you got to make certain decisions. Can I do it? Does it need to be a medical person? Do they need 24-hour care, or I can just stop over once a day? It's the same thing with people as it is with animals. You have to have a care for their older years.
Never thought of it, but it's really important. But again, for conservation purposes, it's really important that zoos you transport animals between zoos, really, for conservation. So yeah, and
I've even seen where maybe if they're geriatric and they're post-reproductive, they're a good auntie to help raise babies in groups. And if you're hand raising a certain species and that animal is not interacting well with the rest of the group, they could be a transition animal for a hand reared animal. Where they learn some of the behavior of their own species before they get put in a group.
Oh, that's good. That is definitely neat. I was just at the mid-year AZA, Association of Zoos and Aquariums meeting. I met some wonderful people there. I met folks from Georgia Aquarium, from Santa Ana Zoo, and the Pittsburgh Zoo. So I was very excited to meet new people in that environment.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I've got a list of names if you need any new people.
Yeah, you're my go-to for anything. You know that you're my go-to person and everything, because oh my goodness, I would probably say, well, I'm going to say a shout out to a person. Don't know if he's watching, but I'm sad to see that with a lot of things that changed in the federal government, a lot of folks that are moved on in different roles or even retired. But Frank Kahn,
Frank Cohn, yeah. He finally retired.
Yes.
And he was a very special person because he started at the National Zoo as a zookeeper in the research department, transitioned into the federal government, and he became the CITES animal transport specialist. And everybody would tap into his knowledge. Yes. I had a problem where I was shipping some what we used to call poison dart frogs, and now they're just called dart frogs. And the airline didn't understand that they're only poisonous if they're in the wild, because we don't know what they're eating in the wild that makes them poisonous.
Right.
But in captivity or ex situ in human care, they are not poisonous. And so we ship them like any other frog, And so he contacted a scientific authority specialist in this. He got a comment from them. He passed it on to the airline. And next thing you know, my problem went away.
Yes. I'm sure, even though he's retired finally after all these years, I can't imagine him not being involved.
I still ask him questions.
I can't imagine him. He still is going to be involved with zoo animals and just regulations. So yeah, but it's amazing to see all, like I said, there's a lot of changes that happen with the federal government and folks that are retired.
Right.
Sad to see him go. And again, he was another person I relied on too as well.
Yeah. Yeah. He's still around, but
Still,
yeah, I don't hit him up as much because I don't, I want him to enjoy his family.
yes. But you give like I said, give him a minute. I'm sure he'll relax, and then he's going to be back in it. Be like you, pro bono, or doing something still associated with animal transportation.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, good. Well, I don't have much more for us to discuss today. I think we hit on some great topics as far as definitely with the continuous
Yeah.
supply, the importance of it, and the need beyond, like I said, was in the zoo animal community, and then also with the pet owners. Now start thinking about what you're going to do and your plans with your pet, and really properly
Right.
prepare them. And it's going to be a big help for you and relieve stress when you know there's a, hey, plan A, plan B, plan C. You've got a plan.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Biggest thing they can do is keep the crate out in the living room so that they go in and out of it, and that it's no big deal. And then maybe shut them in when you go to the store and then come back, let them out. So they get in the habit of the crate is a good place. It's a safe place.
Right.
And that calming them is so instrumental in their safety when they transport.
Right, definitely, because there's so many pets now that, a lot of folks that are working remotely, working from home, and then they're asked to go back to work, and they're stressing because this dog or cat they have now has separation anxiety, and they don't know what to do. It's like, well, you've got to have the crate out at all times, and that's their safety zone, and train them.
Right. Yeah.
That help with that. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll have you back because we love you and just your perspective, and we just always have a great conversation. We hope that everyone that listened enjoyed our session today, and join us next week. I'm trying to think. Oh gosh, stop off the top. Next week we'll have Petkey Emma Webb from Petkey. We'll be talking about microchipping and the significance and importance of that. So join us then. So
there's regulations on that too.
I know. I know. Trust me. Everything is like all these different things.
Regulations.
Yeah, everything. So, but thank you everyone for joining us. We're going to sign off for today. And thank you again, Rochelle, for being a guest today. Bye-bye.
Thank you for inviting me. And I hope everybody enjoyed the session.
Yeah.